So, Hamlet. Hamlet's from right around 1601. Give me an exact date in just a second. First printed in 1603, probably first performed around 1600. So we last did As You Like It. And As You Like, well, Midsummer Night's Dream probably dates from around 95 to 98, first printed in 1600. As You Like It, probably first performed around 1599. It's not first printed until the first folio in 1623. In the late 1590s, what's the exact date? Not positive the exact date. I want to say 97, 98, something like that. Shakespeare's son, Hamlet, dies. Okay? It's not always thought that has a significant impact on Shakespeare's output, but personally speaking, father of two sons, I don't see how it couldn't. He pretty much stops writing the romantic comedies that were pretty popular in the mid-1590s, like As You Like It, in the late 90s, like 99. And right around 99, 1600, for whatever reason, for whatever reason, his output starts to turn much darker. There it is. For example, so As You Like It, it's 1599, probably about the date when it's written. Julius Caesar, about the same date. Okay, obviously, As You Like It, romantic comedy. Julius Caesar, it's the tragedy of Julius Caesar. Okay, Henry V, it's not a tragedy, it's not a comedy, it's a history play, but it is, in some ways, I think it could be argued, in some ways, it's a bit darker than the two parts of Henry IV and Henry II. I mean, we do see some really dark themes in there. For example, when King Henry gives the ultimatum to the people of Harlech. We didn't talk about it. I mean, talked about it, I think, in the video that you saw, where he essentially says, surrender or what? I mean, it'll be out and out genocide. I mean, I'll kill every last living one of you. Women, children, babies, it doesn't matter. Okay? So, then Hamlet in 1600, Troilus and Cressida, which is really bleak. 1600, 1603. Twelfth Night is a comedy, as is All's Well That Ends Well. Those are 1601, 02. But then you get, beginning around 1602, Othello, Measure for Measure, which is sometimes called a comedy, but it's not. It doesn't end up with society perfectly restored. I mean, it's a comedy like Merchant of Venice is a comedy. Merchant of Venice, yeah, it ends up with the happy couples happily married. But you end up also with the problem of Shylock, who is forced to convert to Christianity. In order to live, he has to abandon his Jewish faith and heritage and become a Christian. Now, in Shakespeare's day, that's thought to be a comedy. Why? Because he gets, quote unquote, saved. I think for most of us today, even for those who are Christians, would say, yeah, but forced, I mean, doesn't work well. Okay? Timon of Athens, and then really 1605, Lear, Macbeth, Pericles, Antony and Cleopatra, Coriolanus. I mean, other than Pericles, those are all pretty bleak. Okay? So Hamlet 1600, Othello 1602-03, Lear 05, Macbeth 1606, Antony and Cleopatra 1607 and such. And then he moves off to the what are called the late romances, which we'll talk about at another day, another time. So, Hamlet. Now, when Shakespeare writes Hamlet, he doesn't write it in a vacuum. That is, his audience is already prepared for this kind of play. And by this kind of play, I mean a revenge tragedy. Okay? The genre is originated back in ancient Rome by Seneca, and the genre includes certain conventions. Okay? We're going to talk about Thomas King briefly in just a moment. It's a revenge play. That is, somebody is seeking revenge for the death of a family member. The death of the family member is not an accidental death. It's always somebody who's been murdered. Okay? In the Renaissance, I just kind of obliquely put here, much death. That is, in Renaissance revenge tragedies, like Hamlet, like Thomas Kyd's Spanish tragedy, you end up with a pile of bodies. Okay? Thomas Kyd's did as well. I mean, they were bloody plays. Though in Kyd's day, the blood, the gore, did not occur on stage. That's still off the stage. By Shakespeare's day, yeah, there's bodies piled. At the end of the play, we're going to see on the stage Hamlet, Laertes, Gertrude, Claudius. Those four on the stage. But they're not the only ones that die. We're going to see other people die in the course of the play. Okay? And there's also the ghostly or supernatural element. In a revenge tragedy, it's the ghost of one of the dead, sometimes more than one, sometimes it's the whole family comes. Okay? And you get an element of that, right? Richard III, final scene, Richard sleeping the night before the big battle of Bosworth Field, and all these ghosts come to him. And they heap all these curses and insults on him, and they then go to Henry, and who will become Henry VII, and they do what? They heap praise and blessing and good wishes on him. Okay? So the ghostly supernatural element, and we're going to see that real early in the opening of Hamlet. Okay? Now the audience is also prepared because there's reference made to another Hamlet. And so it's called the Hamlet. Just means precursor. Okay? The earliest form is what means of Hamlet. A play that was probably written sometime in the 1580s, not by Shakespeare. The only problem is this lost Hamlet has never been found. As I said, references are made to it in journals, letters, things like that. But an actual physical copy of this play has never been located. Okay? The earliest reference to the character Hamlet is from Saxo Grammaticus, 13th century, if I remember correctly. In his book, The Gesta Danorum, which is the works of the Danes, it's about Danish history, where he refers to Prince Ambleth, okay, who has the same kind of problems our Hamlet has. He has a usurping uncle and has to deal with that situation. So that's the earliest form of the story. And this is probably going back to pre-1000 AD. Whether there was a real historical Hamlet, because some of the people that are referred to in the Gesta Danorum are real historical figures, and others of them are more than likely mythological / legendary heroes. Okay? So our Hamlet. Let's just talk about our Hamlet. This has been called, well, between this and Lear, the greatest tragedy in the English language. Depending on the day of the week, some people will say it's Lear, others will say it's Hamlet. And it includes, again, what some will call the greatest soliloquy in the English language. Act 3, Scene 1. But I'm going to tell you it's not a soliloquy, to be or not to be. That entire speech is not a soliloquy, because Hamlet's not the only person on the stage. A soliloquy is when you have one person on the stage delivering a speech, and that speech is reflecting that speaker's internal thoughts. What the speaker really thinks, really believes to be true about himself, the world, and or others. Okay? But when Hamlet delivers that speech, Ophelia's on the stage. She might not be front and center, though she should be, according to what we're told in the play. She should be out there. Okay. So, I want to very, very briefly talk about your introduction. Very first paragraph. A recurring motif in Hamlet is of a seemingly healthy exterior concealing an interior sickness. Mere pretense of virtue, as Hamlet warns his mother, will but skin and film the ulcerous place, whilst rank corruption, mining all within, infects unseen. That's true. Where Hamlet says mere pretense of virtue, etc., will but skin and film, and yet in that same scene, your introduction doesn't mention, in that same scene, Hamlet tells his mother to put on virtue, pretend to be virtuous. And we'll talk about why he says that within the context of both that specific scene and the overall or overarching meaning of the play in a moment. Okay? So the next paragraph. Motif of concealed evil and disease continually reminds us that something is rotten in the state of Denmark. I'm not going to say anything else about that. Actually, one other thing about Hamlet. We're getting ready for a presidential election. Now, we've had, I don't know, how many Democrats started running for president? 20, 21, 22, something like that. There's currently, there's some talk. Will Hillary Clinton get in the race? Some people are saying, will Michelle Obama get in the race? Well, back in 84, no, not 84, 88. Back in 1988, when George Bush Sr. was running for election, the big question then was, would Mario Cuomo, governor of New York, run for president for the Democratic side? Because he kind of kept intimating that he would. And what happened, because he kept intimating that he would, but never threw his hat in the ring, is he started being described as Hamlet.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Hamlet, I think, I could be wrong, he keeps saying he's going to kill his father, and then he never does.
Throughout the play, Hamlet seemingly, one of those subjunctive verbs which indicates a condition contrary to fact. Hamlet seemingly shows indecision in action. So why do I say seemingly? Does Hamlet act? Does he act by not acting? Well, let's go back to that first word, act. He does act. There's two different meanings of the word act, right? There's acting like play acting, pretending, putting on a performance, which he tells us early on, first act of the play. He's going to do that. And then there's acting to put into motion, to actually do something, okay? Well, Hamlet will tell us that the second meaning, he's kind of lackadaisical about. He kind of puts that off. Well, there's a reason why he puts that off. See, in a revenge tragedy, you don't necessarily put off your revenge. Okay? Hamlet does. And that's because Hamlet, the play, is, for lack of a better phrase, a Christian revenge tragedy. which hopefully you notice the oxymoronic nature of that. Because if you're Christian, you shouldn't seek revenge. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. Okay? Romans didn't have that idea. Romans were, you do one of mine, I'm going to do two yours. Kind of a thing. The gang mentality, let's say. Okay? But this is a Christian revenge tragedy. How so? Is Hamlet a Christian? Yes, he is. Within the context of the play, it's clear Hamlet is Christian. Elsinore, the town where it all occurs, where most of it occurs, Elsinore is a Christian country, a Christian nation. Denmark is a Christian nation. Go away. So what does that mean? Well, within the play, we are going to see a tension. And the tension is going to be between, or a tension, not the tension. It's kind of going to be between Roman Catholic ideology and Protestant ideology. Maybe you don't like the word ideology, say beliefs instead. Okay? Well, you got to go back for a moment and remember the period in which Shakespeare is living. I mean, religious belief and which religious belief system you subscribe to were extremely important. I mean, lives literally were on the line for what you believed. Your life was literally on the line. Okay? There's huge debate, and it was popular debate. It was popular debate like today people say, everybody talks about the president, etc. Well, in the 1570s, 80s, and 90s, that debate was, one of those debates was about, for example, what's called the real presence. What in the world does that refer to? The real presence of Christ in the Eucharistic meal, in the bread and wine served in communion. Was Christ really physically there? Did that bread literally become the flesh of Christ? And did the wine literally become the blood of Christ? Okay? A lot of people said, yes, it did. A lot of people said, no, it's all metaphorical. It's all symbolic. It's not really that important. But it was so important that where you fell on that could literally determine whether or not you lived. Because that theological issue became a major political issue. And when the Protestants were in power, Queen Elizabeth's reign, okay, if you were out there shouting from the rooftops in the middle of Hyde Park, proclaiming the real presence of Christ's blood and body in the Eucharist, that's a capital offense. Cause for execution. Okay? So, I mean, we kind of think, oh, religion, it's your own little private thing. Not then. Very, very, very important. So one of the things we see in this play is Shakespeare giving voice, a little bit at least, to both sides. One of the ideas, for example, not as dire as this one, was what do you do about saints? Do you pray to saints? Do you acknowledge saints? What about purgatory? Is purgatory real? If it is it necessary to believe in it? Okay? Catholics believed in it, Protestants didn't. We're going to see real quickly in the opening of the play, purgatory is portrayed. Okay? So does that mean Shakespeare, closet Catholic? Or does that mean Shakespeare's merely kind of presenting, let's say, the discussion, the dialogue that's going on? Michael Wood, a historian from doctorate in history from Oxford, who wrote a fantastic book called In Search Yeah, In Search of Shakespeare, I think it was. I required it a couple of semesters, but it's become extremely hard to get in the United States. He argues that Shakespeare's Catholic family background remains with Shakespeare, that Shakespeare is essentially a closet Catholic, and that he allows some of that Catholic belief system to come through his plays. Okay, page 297, let's start. The actual play itself. So we have our dramatis personae. How many of you have read Hamlet before? Only a few of you. How many of you have seen a production of Hamlet? Even fewer of you. Okay. Well, watch Lion King. It's Hamlet.
Yeah.
It's just set in an African savannah with lions instead of people. Okay. Simba is Hamlet. Mufasa is Hamlet Sr. And Scar is Claudius. It's pretty much it. Okay. Pumbaa and Timon, kind of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, though Simba doesn't kill them at the end of the play like he does, Hamlet does Rosencrantz and Guildenstern here. Okay. So you have the ghost of Hamlet Sr., former king of Denmark, Claudius, king of Denmark, former king's brother. And I love just the, former king's brother, not former king's murderous, usurping brother. Okay. Gertrude, queen of Denmark, widow of the former king, now wife of Claudius. What does that right there tell us? What's the relationship? What big word that begins with an I do we not practice today? That's incest, according to traditional Christian morality. Okay? Christian morality, not Old Testament. Because in the Old Testament, if your brother dies, you're supposed to marry your brother's wife to make sure the family line kind of goes on through her. Kind of sucks if you have your own wife, because... Anyways. So Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, son of the late king, and of Gertrude. Okay? Polonius, counselor to the king. Laertes, his son. Ophelia, his daughter. Reynaldo, his servant. Notice Polonius doesn't have a wife. She's dead or something, out of the picture. Horatio, Hamlet's friend and fellow student. Notice the Latinate names. Claudius, that's a Latin name. Gertrude is Germanic. Hamlet is Germanic. Polonius, Latinate. Laertes, Latinate. Ophelia, Reynaldo, Latinate. Horatio, Latinate, meaning Roman. And then you have Voltimand and Cornelius, a bunch of members of the Danish court. And then you have officers and soldiers on watch. We're not going to talk about them very much. Fortinbras, Prince of Norway. There's a captain in his army. Fortinbras, Prince of Norway, by the way, is the son of Norway, the previous king of Norway. So the name of the state is often the name also given to the ruler of the state. So we're going to see in the play, Claudius sends Hamlet to England. When he sends Hamlet to England, he's referring to England as both the place and the person. Okay? Couple of players, that is actors, some messengers, and a couple of clowns. Okay? I don't like the clowns. Gravedigger and his companion. They're called clowns because we tend to think what they say is funny. They're clowns in the sense in Much Ado About Nothing, Dogberry. The constable is a clown. Well, Dogberry's a clown because he's a moron. He's a fool. Not in the Shakespearean or the literary sense of fool. He's an idiot. I mean, literally, IQ 80, 85 maybe. I mean, on a good day, okay? These guys aren't like that. These guys are kind of like the rustic mechanicals in A Midsummer Night's Dream. They spend their days doing hard physical work. They don't spend their days thinking great ideas. Though we're going to see when we get to Act 5, Scene 1 and the Gravedigger scene, they're pretty sharp because they will play on words, and Hamlet's going to go, he could make a good lawyer. Okay? So, Act 1, Scene 1. And yeah, as you can probably already tell, Hamlet will more than likely take more than 3 days. One, it's the longest play of Shakespeare's, if I remember correctly, and it's just about the most dense, other than Lear. Who's there? Now, that's a really important question, because we're going to see, and we're going to ask throughout the play, this kind of thing of who is doing what. What does who's there imply? What's really being asked? What kind of question is it? Somebody says who's there. What prompts the who's there? Okay, could be knock knock joke. What else could it be?
Like scared or startled by something.
They hear something. They see something. Okay? So, the person who says who's there is doing what? Investigating. They're looking. They're watching. They're observing. Okay? Their eyes and ears are open. They're watching. We're going to hear Ophelia say about Hamlet, he's the most observed of all observers. Okay? Later on in the play. What that implies is everybody in this society is doing what?
Being nosy.
Yeah. They're watching. They're looking. But this specific question comes from Bernardo, and what's he physically doing? We're told. 2 sentinels meeting. So if you're a sentinel, what's your job? You're standing guard. You're standing watch. It's your job to notice what goes on. So, who's there? Nay, answer me, standing and floating. No, you tell me who you are. This is what Francisco says. Long live the king. It's almost like that's the code. Okay? If you say long live the king, you're cool. Bernardo? Yep, that's me. 'Tis now struck 12. Get thee to bed, Francisco. That is, Bernardo is replacing Francisco at the watch. Thanks. Poor cold. And I am sick at heart. Something internally is bothering Francisco. Have you had quiet guard? Have you seen anything? No, not a mouse stirring. By the way, some have argued that is where Samuel Clemens? Not Samuel Clemens, because that's Mark Twain. The other one. The St. Nicholas story. Not a mouse was stirring, no one was stirring, not even a mouse.
'Twas the night before.
'Twas the night before Christmas, thank you. That's from Shakespeare, okay? Not a mouse stirring. Clement Clark Moore, thank you, okay? So, Horatio and Marcellus come in. And they, talk a little bit. And Horatio asks, line 25 or so, has this thing appeared again tonight? Notice, we're not told what this thing is initially. All we're told is, has this thing appeared again? So, it's appeared before, but notice, whatever this is that appears, kind of has the guards what? Little spooked, little on edge. I've seen nothing. Horatio says, 'tis but our fantasy. Why? What did Theseus say about fantasy? It gives shape to airy nothing. Fantasy here means it's just our imaginations. We didn't really see what we've said we've seen. It will not, and he will not let belief take hold of him, touching this dreaded sight twice seen of us. Both of them together have seen it, and they've seen it twice. Now, I can understand if maybe Caleb had a hallucination, maybe twice, but Caleb and Bjorn both having the same hallucination at the same time? It's Twilight Zone-ish, right? Will not appear. Horatio doesn't believe it. Why? Well, Hamlet's going to tell us something about Horatio a little bit later that will explain why. So Horatio has to see before he can believe. So they start talking about it, and Bernardo says, last night we saw it all. Line 39. When yon same star that's westward from the pole had made his course to illume that part of heaven where now it burns, last night at this same time, that's what he's just said, Marcellus and myself, the bell then beating one, and the implication is that as the ghost enters, boom, the bell rings. Look. So notice how Bernardo sets it up. Last night, that star was, it's just where it is right now. And the bell, in the same figure like the king that's dead. It looks like Hamlet Sr. Marcellus, to Horatio, thou art a scholar, speak to it. Thou art a scholar probably means, your footnote, I think says this, speak to it in Latin. Like ghosts are going to speak Latin. Okay. Looks are not like the king. Doesn't that look exactly like the king? Mark it. Mark means pay attention. Look at this thing. Really see it. What art thou that usurpst this time of night together with that fair and warlike form in which the majesty of buried Denmark did sometimes march? Notice after the word night, comma, the next 2.5 lines, it's all spoken without a break. Or it should be. Should be spoken without a pause. What art thou that usurps this time of night? Take a breath. Together with that fair and warlike form in which the majesty of buried Denmark did sometimes march. Pause. Notice the emphasis. You look like Claudius. You look like Hamlet Sr. By heaven I charge thee. By heaven, as God is my witness, speak. So he's swearing an oath, may God make you speak. Which is kind of interesting, because Hamlet's going to say later on, there is more in heaven and earth than is dreamt of in your philosophy, Horatio. And the way that's usually understood is Horatio's kind of a good Roman Epicurean. There is no heaven, there is no hell, this is all there is. And so here, Horatio's like what's the phrase? The proverbial atheist in the foxhole. The shells start coming in. Please, God, save me. Okay? It's offended. Why? Because when Horatio speaks, notice the stage direction given verbally by the characters. It is offended. It's almost like the ghost goes, oh, and then, see, it stalks away, and the ghost turns and starts to walk away. I mean, Monty Python. I wish they had done something with this because they would have just butchered it. Had a lot of fun with it. Stay, speak, I charge thee, speak. And the ghost leaves. Okay, Horatio. Now what do you think? How now, Horatio? You tremble and look pale. Is not this something more than fantasy? This isn't mere imagination. Tell us, what do you think? Before my God. So he is a believer in God. I might not disbelieve without the sensible and true avouch of mine own eyes. Now, before mine God, that's an oath. Okay? I swear to God, unless I had seen this with my own eyes, I would not be able to believe it. It's so out of the realm of the possible. It's so out of the ordinary. Is it not like the king? Doesn't that look like dead Hamlet? As thou art to thyself. Well, how art thou art to thyself? How art thou to thyself? Look in a mirror. Looks pretty much the same. What's he really mean? It is. It is the dead king. And he then goes on and says, in fact, he's wearing the very same armor he had when he, the ambitious Norway, combated. The ambitious Norway, that's Fortinbrah's father. Young Fortinbrah, the new prince/king of Norway, became king when Hamlet Sr. killed his father. Okay? Marcellus, we've seen him twice before. This is now the third time. And at the same hour. That's what jump at this hour means. Exactly at the same hour. Horatio. In what particular thought to work, I know not. That is, why he's done this 3 days in a row, 3 nights in a row, I don't understand. But in the gross and scope of mine opinion, that is, giving my opinion the widest realm, the widest scope of thought, this bodes some strange eruption to our state. What's an eruption? Like when Mount St. Helens? Thank you. Okay. It's a problem. Why does he say this bodes an eruption to our state? How often do you see dead rulers walking around the kingdom? Not usually. What would it mean if today, let's pick this one. What would it mean if today, the ghost of Richard Nixon was seen pacing the halls of Congress? Impending, impeachment, and then Andrew Johnson, the same thing. People would go, don't do the impeachment, It would bode something not well. So, Marcellus says, can someone tell me why we're keeping watch? Because I don't understand that part. I mean, yeah, the ghost thing, that's pretty bad. But why are we keeping watch in the first place? Notice what the import of that question is. If we were keeping watch, we would never know about this. But we are keeping watch, and the ghost apparently knows, and the ghost wants us to know that the ghost is appearing. So Horatio says, yeah, I can answer that. Or at least I can tell you the rumors. Our last king, the one who just left, dead Hamlet, was, as you know, by Fortinbrah of Norway, thereto pricked on by a most emulate pride, dared to the combat, in which our valiant Hamlet, for so this side of our known world esteemed him, did slay this Fortinbrah, that is, Norway Senior. So notice, Norway follows the same practice as Denmark. The father's name is Fortinbrah, the son's name is Fortinbrah. The father's name is Hamlet, the son's name is Hamlet. Okay? Kind of Germanic practice, by the way. Or very similar to that. So, he killed Fortinbrah, who by a sealed compact, well ratified by law and heraldry, did forfeit with his life all those his lands which he stood seized of to the conqueror. That is, and there was an agreement, if Fortinbrah died, then he would deliver all those lands that he conquered would become the lands to the person who defeated him. If Claudius had died, the lands he conquered would have become Norway's lands. Cool. Everybody's clear about that. The problem is, line 99, now Sir Young Fortinbrah, of unimproved metal, hot and full. Unimproved is kind of untried. He's full of himself. Kind of like Hotspur before battle. He does what? Hath in the skirts of Norway here and there sharked up a list of lawless resolutes for food and diet to some enterprise that hath the stomach. He's come up with a list of charges and accusations, and he's done what? He's left Norway. He's on the march. He's on the prowl. That's why we are standing watch. We are here to keep an eye out, to utter the warning if Fortinbrah or his forces are seen. Okay? Bernardo. Yep, I think that's it. Line 112. Well may it sort that this portentous figure comes armed through our watch so like the king that was and is the question of these wars. He's trying to warn us. Horatio, a mote it is to trouble the mind's eye. What's a mote?
Like before the castle, there's like a...
No, not that kind of mote. That's M-O-A-T. Because this is one that troubles the eye. It's a speck of dust. That's an allusion to, possibly, I think it is. Most scholars don't. What does Christ say about judging?
Remove the log in your own eye before you move the speck.
Exactly. Remove the beam or log from your own eye before you try to pull the little speck out of somebody else's eye. Because what does a speck, if you've ever had like a piece of sawdust, a single piece of sawdust in your eye, what's it do? It really irritates. Okay? He says this situation, it's a mote. It's small. It's minor. But it does what? It troubles the mind's eye, not the physical eye. So if it troubles the mind's eye, what's it do to the mind? It makes it shaky, which is going to be a theme throughout the play. Hamlet is going to talk about this distracted globe. So if your mind is distracted, what can it not do? Focus. It can't focus. Okay? In the most high and palmy state of Rome, and what does Horatio go on to talk about? Before Julius fell, that's Julius Caesar, which was, what did I say, 1599? Yep, 1599, just a year or so before this. So I think when Shakespeare refers to that, when the play, he's kind of going, y'all have seen Julius Caesar, right? Really good play. Last year we put it on. Everybody would be familiar with that, by the way. What? Graves stood tenantless, according to the mythology, and Shakespeare puts this in his play. Before Caesar was killed, when the soothsayer says, beware the Ides of March, and Caesar's wife Calpurnia has these dreams, well, part of those dreams are the graves are opened up and the dead walk. What else happens? Stars with rains, trains of fire and dews of blood, disasters in the sun, eclipses. There were all of these portents, both in the skies and on the earth. He's saying what? Same kind of portents are now starting to happen. When the dead king arises and starts walking the battlements in full battle armor, bad stuff's going to happen. Ghost comes back in. I'll cross it though it blast me. Cross it doesn't mean he's going to whip out his holy cross and go, in the name of Jesus. It means he's going to confront it. He's going to cross its path, which is a damn fool thing to do if it's a real ghost, right? Because you go and the ghost comes, you cross it and the ghost touches you. According to some stories, if a ghost touches you, you die. Okay? Stay illusion. Now, by calling it illusion, does he say, stay mere apparition, you're not real? Is this some weird psychological thing of going, I name you and I claim you and I know you're not real and you disappear and I feel better now? No. Illusion means what? Bad sight. Stay bad sight. Bad vision. You're not appropriate here, but I want you to stop. If thou hast any sound or use of voice, speak to me. Because it's a ghost, right? A ghost wouldn't have what? Vocal cords. It wouldn't have oxygen in its lungs to blow through those vocal cords and make sounds. So if you can make a noise, speak. If there be any good to be done that may to thee do ease, and grace to me, speak. Now, what has Horatio just offered the ghost? Back up for a moment. Why would somebody become a ghost?
Unfinished business.
Died. Louder.
Unfinished business.
Unfinished business. Okay. Why do people say there are haunted houses? Real haunted houses, not the stupid make-believe stuff. But there are lots of people who believe there are really houses, places that are haunted. Okay.
Spirit was harmed in some way.
Because the person whose soul is now a ghost was harmed there in some way, and maybe, as Sarah says, there's unfinished business. That is, I'm going to get back at them. Or maybe something needs to be done so that the person can requiescat in pacem, rest in peace. Okay? See, because not everybody becomes a ghost. Most in the mythology of or belief system about ghosts, most people don't. Most die and they go on to whatever, or they become nothing. But ghosts, for some reason, stick around. So he says, if I can do what? If I can bring you any ease, if I can solve your problem, speak to me. Or he says, and if doing that to you will do what? Bring grace to me. Well, how can solving a ghost's problem bring grace to me? What kind of grace? The grace from the ghost? Is the ghost going to come up and, bless you? No. But if you're putting a ghost at ease, if you're putting a troubled soul at peace, what are you really doing? Love for your neighbor. That's the second great commandment. That brings grace. Grace there being a theological gift. Grace is a gift of God. It's unmerited, it's unearned, etc., etc. Okay? It can be drawn, however, according to the teachings, at least, of the Christian church. So, speak. So it doesn't speak. If thou art privy to thy country's fate, if you know what's going to happen in the future, speak. Which foreknowing may avoid, which because you know about it, you can tell us and we can avoid it. Speak. Or, no, this is interesting. Or if thou hast abhorred in thy life, extorted treasure in the womb of earth, for which they say you spirits oft walk in death, speak. If you died and you had a bunch of treasure buried in the earth, and that's why some people say you ghosts walk the earth, speak. What's the implication of that? Just speaking about it will release the ghost from its whatever this is? Nope. It's so that Horatio can then go to where that gold is, dig it up, and disperse it. Give it away. It's almost like by hoarding the gold, what has really been tied to the earth. The spirit. Exactly. Cock crows. Okay? The ghost leaves. Bernardo. 150 or so. It was about to speak when the cock crew. And then it started away like a guilty thing, says Horatio, upon a fearful summons. I've heard another story, another popular kind of imagination idea, that the cock doth with his lofty and shrill-sounding throat awake the god of day, and at his warning, whether in sea or fire, in earth or air, the extravagant and erring spirit hies to his confine. The extravagant and erring. Erring doesn't mean wrong. It means like errant, wandering. Must do what? Go back to where it should be confined. Look at Midsummer Night's Dream. King of the Fairies. Oberon. Oberon says, as morning starts to come, but we are fairies of a different sort. That is, I'm king. I don't have to flee because of the rise of day. Okay? Puck and others, yeah, they probably do. So, Marcellus then says, yeah, I've heard another reason. 164. Some say, and this is popular folktale stuff from Shakespeare's day, that Shakespeare weaves into this play. He does it into Merry Wives of Windsor. He does it a little bit into Midsummer Night's Dream. He does it into several plays. Some say that ever against that season comes wherein our Savior's birth is celebrated, that is, Christmas time, winter. This bird of dawning singeth all night long. That is, like the morning lark. And then they say no spirit dare stir abroad. That is, at Christmas time, and he's probably referring to the 12 days of Christmas. The spirits are confined. They can't roam the earth. Why? Because those 12 days are kind of special holy days. They're the days, by the way, between Christmas, or its other name, Nativity, and Theophany, or Epiphany. December 25th, January 6th. That's the 12 days of Christmas. That's what that song actually refers to. Okay? So this is the period of also the Christmas revels. Okay? That no spirit dare stir abroad. The nights are wholesome. No planets strike. That is, there's no influence of the planets, astrology, all that kind of stuff. No fairy takes. That is, no fairy takes somebody's child and replaces it with one of their own. Nor witch hath power to charm. So hallowed and so gracious, full of grace, is what that word means, is that time. Horatio. Yeah, I've heard that too. And I kind of believe it. I do in part believe it. Which part does he believe? Okay. He says, let's go tell Hamlet. Let's go tell young Hamlet. For upon my life, the spirit dumb to us will speak to him. 1-2. So, Act 1, Scene 1. Soldiers on watch. They see something. It's foreboding. It doesn't portend well. And then we get 1-2. And notice we're told flourish. Trumpets, fanfare, the whole 9 yards. Think royal wedding in England. I mean, all the stops are out. And in comes Claudius, king of Denmark, Gertrude the queen, the council, all his royal advisors. That's not like 1, 2, 3, or 4. That's like 10 or 20 or 30 or 40. Polonius, his son Laertes, Hamlet, cum aliis, with others. And the king comes in, and he gets this nice big speech. Notice it's not a soliloquy because there's all other kinds of people. What's the purpose of his speech? I usually go through it kind of line by line, but I want to try to skip a little bit. What's he saying in this speech?
Mourning his brother's death, but then celebrating his new marriage.
Notice the two parts. I'm sad that my brother's dead, but I'm happy because I married his wife. Now, that's it, but there's more to it than that, right? Because how does he say he married his brother's wife? Did he do it all on his own? Did he just wake up one day and go, Gertrude's pretty hot. I think I'll marry her. No. He says, nor have we herein, line 14, barred your better wisdoms, which have freely gone with this affair along. He's talking to his advisors, his council of state. I sought your advice, and you said yes. Now what's another way of putting that? Why do presidents sometimes, other than the law since the War Powers Act in 1977 or so, why do presidents sometimes go to Congress to get authorization for a military action? Think sinister. Think like I tend to think. Be jaded and old,
So they can blame someone else.
Bingo! You can spread that blame. So if it goes south, if it really doesn't work out well, does all the blame rest on the president's shoulders? Nope. I mean, and I was a big pro invade Iraq guy. One of the things Bush was able to say was, it's not just us. It's all the Western intelligence agencies said this. And it wasn't just me. Congress said. Okay? It's one of Joe Biden's big problems today with the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Joe, you said invade Iraq. Okay? Not a lot of the others did. Some of them did. Okay? So, you guys went along with this. Thanks for all thanks. So then he addresses the problem of young Fortinbras. Okay? He addresses Cornelius and Voltimand. They leave. Then he addresses Laertes. Says, here, you want to go back to Paris? Go back to your studies? Laertes says, yep. He says, as long as your father's okay with that is, I'm not going to get between you and your father, but you have my blessing, which is pretty much signal to Polonius, let him go. So, he leaves, and then he says, line 64, but now my cousin Hamlet and my son. Cousin there doesn't mean literal blood relation cousin. It means family, kin. Son does not mean son at all, because he's not his son. It's just like when an older gentleman speaks to a younger man and says, now son. Okay. In Hamlet, and it's interesting that here in this text, we don't have in parentheses that this is an aside. Because in most editions, it will say this. It will have Hamlet in either in brackets or parentheses, aside, and that will be in italics. In other words, it's a stage direction. And the stage direction is for Hamlet to turn and look at the audience and say, a little more than kin and less than kind. Why? What does he mean, a little more than kin and less than kind? Those two words? Go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say that they're blood related, they're very close, but in spirit, they're very different.
They're more than just kin. They're what? Uncle to nephew. In Germanic society, uncle to nephew is about the strongest blood bond there is. It's stronger than father to son. Especially, it doesn't work this way in Hamlet, especially if it's mother's brother to son. If it's the mother's brother who is the uncle to the son. We don't know why. This just shows up in all of the early Germanic literature. Okay? So, we're more than kin. You're my uncle. But less than kind? Kind there does not mean nice. Well, let me rephrase that. Surface literal level. Yeah, that's what it means. What's the other meaning for kind? What kind of phone is this? It's an Apple, right? So if somebody else had a Samsung and I were to hold that up, you would say it's Samsung. So what does that mean, Apple, Samsung? But what does the kind there mean? Different nature. You're more than kin, but you're less than natural. How is Claudius less than natural now to Hamlet? You're my uncle and stepfather. That's incest. That shouldn't happen. Okay? And there's another element too. In Germanic fashion, as we saw somewhat in the history plays, if we had read more of the history plays, this really would have come out. In Germanic fashion and somewhat in English fashion, especially in the Middle Ages, what happens when the monarch dies, if the monarch has children? Children become the monarch, right? How? In what order?
Oldest son.
Eldest son. Hamlet. When Hamlet Sr. died, Hamlet Jr. should have become the king. That is, the council should have elected, because in some Germanic societies, there was an election system. The electors did the electing. It wasn't the hoi polloi, it wasn't the people. Okay? It was the electors. That's how it happened, for example, in Anglo-Saxon England. If the king died and the king had an eldest son, the people, what's called the Veton, the Council of Advisors, they said, all right, Alfred will be king. And that made Alfred king. Everybody had to go along with that. Notice, Claudius takes that spot. And Hamlet's going to say something about that very, very soon. I think we'll get to it. So, little more than kin and less than kind. King, how is it that the clouds still hang on you? He's like Eeyore. Everywhere he goes, there's a cloud and it's raining. But what does he mean by clouds? Because it's not literal clouds, obviously. He's upset. He's depressed. How do we know? Look at Gertrude's line that comes up following. Not so, my lord, Hamlet says. I am too much in the sun. What? What are you talking about, too much in the sun? Well, Claudius used the metaphor of clouds, so Hamlet says, no, there aren't any clouds around me. I'm too much in the sun. I am in the blaze of the sunlight. What did Louis XIV of France call himself? Anybody know? The Sun King. Okay? That's what Shakespeare's getting at. Too much in the sun, I am too much in the radiance of your glory, O great and mighty and powerful King. Hamlet's being a little bit facetious here. Okay? Claudius doesn't pick up on it. Gertrude does. Why? She's his mama. She knows when he's smarting off. And he's smarting off. Good, Hamlet. Cast thy knighted color off. Notice the thy. Notice the pronoun usage in this play. Shakespeare's going to go back and forth between the TH forms and the Y forms. Cast thy knighted color off, and let thine eye look like a friend on Denmark. She's implying you're not looking friendly to Denmark. Denmark meaning Claudius. Do not forever with thy veiled lids seek for thy noble father in the dust. Does that mean he's walking around? Dad, are you there? Thy veiled lids. He's also not walking around with his eyes closed. So why does she refer to his eyes as veiled? Because he is walking around like this all the time. Head downcast. So what people see of his eyes are just his lids. Thou know'st 'tis common. What is common? What comes next? All that lives must die. Passing through nature to eternity. Now, that, just one second, Joseph, that becomes a major theme. That is something Hamlet is going to, like a master guitar player, he's just going to riff on throughout the play. Yes?
So Hamlet didn't like Claudius to begin with, but then once he talks to the ghost, he really doesn't like him.
Yes.
Okay. Let's get that straight.
In fact, before he even talks to the ghost, we're going to see in this same scene, Hamlet's going to get his first soliloquy. And Hamlet's really going to tell us there what's going on. or what he thinks is going on. Okay? And it's really going to show us what he thinks about his uncle. Okay? So, Hamlet listens to his mother. She says, "Thou know'st 'tis common, all that lives must die, passing through nature to eternity." Why does she bring this up? Well, what did Claudius start his speech with? "Though yet of Hamlet our dear brother's death the memory be green," that is, he ain't been dead long. Depending upon which lines of the play you refer to, it's sometime between 2 and 4 months. So Hamlet's mom mourned, remarried, and jumped in the sheets with his uncle sometime within 2 to 4 months after the death of his father. Okay? He says, "Aye, madam, it is common." Yeah, I understand. Things that live die. I get it. Then why seems it so particular with you? Why does that death, more particularly this death, really seem to bother you so much? Wow, what a cold, frozen woman to her son. I don't think she's cold and frozen to her husband. In fact, we're pretty much told a lot of action going on in bed between those two. Hamlet seems met. See, there's that subjunctive verb again. Seems. Hamlet knows what seems means. Nay, it is. It what? This death is particular with me. I know not seems. 'Tis not alone my inky cloak, good mother. Here's some sarcasm for you. Because he's replying to her good Hamlet. Nor customary suits of solemn black, nor windy suspiration of forced breath, no, nor the fruitful river in the eye, nor the dejected behavior of the visage, together with all forms, moods, shapes of grief, that can denote me truly. So what's he just told us about himself? She says, "Cast thy nighted color off." He wears black, color of night. So he says, "It's not alone my inky cloak, mother, nor customary suits of solemn black." So not just the cloak, but the clothes underneath. "Nor the windy suspiration of forced breath." What's that? The sign. "No, nor the fruitful river in the eye, crying, tears. Nor the dejected behavior of the visage." He walks around with a frown, a sad face. "Together with all forms, moods, shapes of grief." That is, all forms of grief, all moods of grief, all shapes of grief. All of these, taken together, cannot denote me truly. What's the difference between a denotation and a connotation? Denotation, literal dictionary definition of the word. Connotation, the various meanings the words may suggest. He says, these things, these symbols, they don't show what's really in me. Now, I don't know about you, but every time I read that as Hamlet's one of these. Boom! He's on a short fuse. He's saying, "Oh, I have so much inside." These indeed seem. Clothes seem, right? You can put on clothes, you can put on makeup and such, and make a pig look handsome or beautiful. Doesn't make it beautiful. These indeed seem. Why? For they are actions that a man might play. Huge, huge, huge theme in the play, throughout the play is play acting or pretending. Another one, observing, seeing, watching, or you could put a negative twist on it and say spying. Those two ideas just resonate all throughout the play. And there will be others, as we'll see. They are actions that a man might play, but I have that within which passes show. It surpasses what I can show you. Why? Because if I were to really show you, it would be destructive. These but the trappings and the suits of woe. The king. We won't get to Hamlet's soliloquy. 'Tis sweet and commendable in your nature, Hamlet. In your nature. What's he talking about? In your sonship of your father. It's appropriate, Hamlet, to give these morning duties to your father. Well done. Well done. But, what does but always imply? Contrast, turn, change. You must know your father lost a father. Your father lost your grandfather. That father, your grandfather, lost his. And the survivor bound in filial obligation for some term to do obsequious sorrow. It's right to mourn the dead for a term. But to persevere in obstinate condolement, sorrow. Notice, obstinate. If you're obstinate, you're what?
Refusing to budge.
Yeah, you're stubborn. Okay? Is a course of impious stubbornness. Impious, it goes against God. It goes against religion. It goes against devotion. It goes against what is right. So he's just told Hamlet what? You're going against God. Okay? So you're anti-God. 'Tis unmanly grief, and you're acting like a woman. So he's quote-unquote de-Christianized him, and now he's castrated him. Hard for a man to take. It shows a will most incorrect to heaven. There's against God again. A heart unfortified. You're weak. You're a sissy. A mind impatient. Impatient doesn't mean in a rush here. It means unable to sustain, unable to endure. In understanding, simple and unschooled. So you're going against God, you're acting like a woman, you're a fool, and you're uneducated. I don't know about you, but the country I'm from, them's fighting words. Them's all, or let you and I take it outside here, buddy. For what we know must be and is, must be what's going to happen in the future, and is as common as any, the most vulgar thing to sense, why should we in our peevish opposition take it too hard? You know your father had to die. Suck it up, buttercup. That's what he's telling them. 'Tis a fault to heaven. It's a fault to the dead. In other words, he begins by saying, oh, it's sweet, Hamlet. It's what you owe your father. Now he's saying, and if your father were here, he'd be upset. He'd say, that's not my son. That's not how I raised my son to be. A fault to nature, to reason most absurd. His common theme is, what is the common theme of nature? Everything that lives dies. What are the two constants in life we like to joke? Death and taxes, okay? So, we pray you, through to earth this unprevailing woe. Think of us. He's using the royal we. Think of us as a father. Let me replace dear old dad. Okay? Why? For let the world take note. That is all right. Everybody here, everybody who's here, you hear me saying this now. So this is what's going to go. You are the most immediate to our throne. If I die, Hamlet becomes king. That's what that means. And Hamlet's got to be sitting there going, I was the most immediate to the throne even before. Instead, you took it. As he's going to say in his soliloquy. So he goes, I don't want you to go back to Wittenberg. It's at Wittenberg that Hamlet's a student. It's a university. Generally, how old are you when you attend university? And I know this is Germany and it's several hundred years ago, so it's a little bit different. It generally 16 to 24, roughly. Anybody know how old Hamlet is?
Isn't he like 30?
We're told later. He's 30. And he's an undergraduate. Get on with life, buddy. Okay? So, he says, we'd like you to stay here. The queen says, come on, Hamlet, let not thy mother lose her prayers. And he says, all right, I'll stay. So they all leave. Ooh, we'll just get to it. Hamlet gets his first soliloquy. Everybody leaves. He's alone on stage. And what does his first soliloquy tell us Hamlet is thinking about? What is foremost in his mind? Oh, that this too sullied. First folio has solid. Sullied means what?
Dirty.
Dirtied. If you sully someone's reputation, that means you dirty it. Oh, that this too sullied flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. Sullied flesh, solid flesh. Well, solid flesh makes a lot of sense, right? Because flesh is material, it's solid. It's probable that the reason one version has solid, and the others have sullied is that one person who had a copy of Shakespeare's manuscripts and went to print a copy of it had a word that he or she couldn't make sense of. Knew it started with an S, and had an L, and it ended with a D. But then they saw the word flesh and saw it thaw, resolve, melt. Got to be talking solid. Because something that's sullied doesn't thaw, resolve. It doesn't melt, thaw, and resolve. But metaphorically, figuratively in the line, or in the passage, what is Hamlet talking about? What's wrong with his flesh? Is it that it's solid? No, it's that it's dirty. It's foul. This gets to the theological concerns of the play. Because what does he say he wants to happen to his flesh? That it would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. What do you do when you distill water? You boil it, right? And then do what? You capture the steam, or you make whiskey or something. You boil the mash, it boils, it produces condensate, it rises, the steam rises, it gets in the little curly thing like that, and what happens in that? It cools, and it comes out how? Pure. Over here, it's impure. Hamlet's saying that this would melt, thaw, and resolve into a dew. Pure, clean, without stain. Or that the everlasting had not fixed his canon against self-slaughter. What's the or get to? What's self-slaughter? Suicide. Oh, that I would die. That's the first part. Or that I could kill myself. So when Hamlet said, these indeed seem, they are actions that a man might play, these but the trappings and the suits of woe. How much woe is inside? When someone is contemplating suicide, what does that mean? They see what going forward? Nothing. There's no light at the end of that tunnel. It's just one dark tunnel. They see no future, no hope. This is a soliloquy, folks. This is telling us Hamlet's deepest, darkest inner thoughts. Life sucks, man. Why does it, though? Well, he tells us in the rest of that soliloquy. How weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world. What's he mean, the uses of this world? All the stuff. All this, everything in this world, Hamlet says, are for him weary, it is worn out, stale, they have no taste, flat, textureless, if you want, and unprofitable. They don't bring anything good to me. So if that's what you think, that's an expression of what? There's not a word for it in Shakespeare's day. We've got to get all the way up to Friedrich Nietzsche to get the word. That's nihilism. That's... Okay, we'll stop there and we'll pick up with this speech. And maybe we'll finish this act on Tuesday. Kidding. We'll get at least through Act 1. Don't forget your exams a week from today. Is that what I said? No, Tuesday. Tuesday.